Every Fortnite game is comprised of 3 different parts: off-spawn, mid-game, and endgame, and I'm going to be teaching you how to become the best fighter in each one of these scenarios. And if you can get better and master everything that I teach you in this video, you'll never find yourself losing a fight again. But with that, let's get right into the video. First, off-spawn. And the first thing you should be doing off-spawn is looking around your drop spot to scope out if you are contested and or how many players are landing with you or around you. By doing this, you can help plan out your whole off-spawn because you know where and how to work around your opponents. Another tip is most players off-spawn will push you without lots of materials, ammo, or a decent weapons, and also make very bad peeks and horrible decisions. For example, right here there are 2 people fighting and they aren't using extra protection during their fight, so after one of them dies, I can just come in and clean up the fight. Now, the next thing that I recommend, and this is if you don't get conned by too many players or you just have the POI to yourself, is to loot up and make sure you are prepared for any and all fights. However, if you do find yourself in another fight, try and notice patterns and simple mistakes that these players are making and use that knowledge to capitalize and kill them. Then, once again, loot up and prepare yourself for more fights. As you can see, I was unconned after that fight, so I decided to kill the boss and loot up for my next fight. Now, we are heading off into mid-game. In mid-game, the number one thing you want to do is finish fights as quickly as possible. As you can see in that first fight, I got into his face and did a lot of opening damage without him hitting me at all. I now know that he is low and one shot will kill him, so all I need to do is pressure him until he makes a mistake, and I obviously got that free kill. And in this fight, I notice him and I teleport on his head and get lots of entry damage without him dealing any to me, and he obviously runs away, which is why I can then follow and capitalize on all that entry damage. After those 2 fights, I get pushed right away by another third party, which is fine. And this is where another tip is handy, and that is to not get greedy and go for the loot right after the kill when you are getting third partied. It's better to damage or catch your opponent off guard right after your previous fight, as they are expecting you to box up or to heal right away. And that is what I did right there. I switched my SMG and sprayed him, and he ended up not building, so it was another free kill, as not finishing a fight quick enough will result in many third parties and might possibly end up as your reason for dying. So the number one way to end a fight quick is getting some early entry damage and applying hard pressure after you get some good tags. Applying that constant pressure makes them make a mistake, which you can capitalize on once again and kill them. Another tip is to try and avoid fights in the center of the zone. Even though Chapter 6 map is insanely big, you want to try your best to not fight in the middle of the zone. This is where most third parties will happen, and also where you are out in the open to get a free beam on. Another thing is to make sure when you are rotating in mid-game to be aware of your surroundings. I see way too often in ranked and just in general in Fortnite is people tend to look in the direction that they are heading towards. Instead, what you want to do is look around but still move in the direction. And that is what I did here, and it ended up giving me a free kill. Another great example of what not to do is be this kid in the car and make simple mistakes like hitting something while in the car, then hopping out and peeking right away. So I already have the advantage because I know where he is fully and I'm already scoping in, which means I can start shooting before him. What you should have done was build up and box up and heal, but have enough space around him. Then after he did that, he should have peeked me from an off angle so that I wouldn't be able to see him, but he can see me so he can get entry damage. These simple mistakes cost him his life, and these are so simple that he could have avoided this and went on to win this game. Once again, another great example of what not to do is be this person who is crouching up behind me without shooting. Now I'm not saying to not crouch, but I'm saying take the shot when the person is out in the open. I did not see him the first time around, and while I was shooting at the other kid, he could have beamed me. So take advantage of these small opportunities, as it can be game changing. Also, he shouldn't have tried to edit down on me when he was weak. He should have created space and reset. Players in Fortnite seem to be impatient, and having that little bit of extra patience can reset the fight and put it in your favor. Another tip for the season is to try and avoid being in the air. This season, all weapons are hit scan, and so being in the air for too long makes you way too big a target. It makes you so vulnerable and just puts you in a horrible place. As you can see, I absolutely fried this kid before he even touched the ground, and it put him at such a big disadvantage that he started to freak out. Another thing in most situations is to try and be calm whether attacking or defending. If this kid held himself together and created space and played around it, he could have beat me. And yes, this game is heavily reliant on mechanics like piece control, editing, speed, builds, and aim. It is just as important to be as smart as possible when it comes to fighting. Make sure you know what you're doing before you do it, otherwise you're going into a fight without a plan and you won't know the outcome. Another thing is to abuse the movement this season. There's so many different ways to outplay your opponents, like teleporting above them, or just wall jumping or mantling. Try and get these movements under your belt and it will help you guys so much. Now in this fight, I outplay my opponent so much. As you can see, I get some entry damage at the beginning, but the best thing I do here is predicting his movements and using that against him. He is way too predictable in this fight, And that is where one of the most important things come into place, which is pre-peace. You want to use pre-peace as much as you can when it comes to your opponents, especially easily and predictable opponents. You just know where they are going, and you can catch them totally off guard, which ends up winning you a lot more fights. Now we are on to Endgame, which is this game. Which in this game, there wasn't that big of an endgame, but there was still a good amount of fights to be held. So the main thing you want to avoid in endgame is something called tunnel visioning. This basically means you focus on one thing way too much and completely forget or avoid other things. For example, you might be spraying a player and you completely forget that there are other opponents around you, which ultimately ends up damaging you or killing you. Or being too focused on a single fight that you don't realize zone is coming really quick and it mess ups your rotate. Another very important thing in endgame is making sure that you are aware about your surroundings as much as possible. Everything here is happening very quickly and in such a small area of the map that every movement and or shot matters. Here it is all about taking your time and using the space and materials that you have to your advantage. And one of the main things that I see that ruins people's endgames is not building enough or building too much. Make sure you know how much materials you have and what is the most efficient way for you to build in that endgame. Once again, don't be like these people who are just running out in the open or trying to escape me, don't use any materials or heals. They're losing their own game by doing these things. It's crazy to think how many kills and games you would have won by using these simple tactics. Now, in this endgame, there wasn't too many players, and at this point in the game, I was like the next Peterbot. So I decided to push in not the smartest ways possible, but they still worked out. Here I could have avoided a lot of damage and maybe got the kills in a better and more efficient way, but sometimes the best way to end a game or keep players is by applying so much pressure that they don't know what to do. Once again though, don't push without a plan. I thought of what I was going to do before I did it, and that's why it worked out in my favor for the most part. And in mid-game and endgame, one of the best things to make you outlast your opponents, or just beat them in fights, is by playing with confidence. Doing this alone can change so much for you in your game. And one last tip is to use the terrain in your surroundings to your advantage. For example, if there's a lot of trees, rocks, bushes, etc., use them to hide or play around, as you can catch a lot of your opponents off guard and get some easy entry damage or just clean up some fights. Also, third parties in mid-game and endgame are very important because usually you can just come in and clean up these fights for free. And as you can see, these last two players that I went up against play this very dumbly, and they tried to leave without applying any pressure or damage to me. They should have tried and got some damage on me, as it could have slowed down my kill process. And on this last guy, obviously, there's nothing to be too fancy about, so I'm not going to go for any clips or anything, because I just want to end the fight. Ending the fight is the most important thing. And once again, as you see, I used my movement and abilities to outplay my opponent, which he doesn't realize I teleported above him and got the free kill on him. And if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe and send the video to a friend. And also use code NOTFLOW in the Fortnite and Rocket League item shop, #ad, #epic partner. And you guys have a great rest of your day, and I love you all.